The night was quiet. The big office building stood tall, but inside it was almost empty. The workers had already gone home. The lights on most floors were off, only a few dim bulbs were still glowing. At this late hour, only one man was still moving around. His name was Daniel. Daniel was not a rich man. He was not a boss, not a manager, not even an officer. He was just a janitor. Every night, when the city slept, he cleaned floors, washed windows, and emptied trash cans. Daniel wore the same old uniform every day. It was faded and torn in some places. His shoes had holes in them, and his hands were rough from hard work. He did not complain, because this was the only job he had. He lived in a small rented room with very little furniture. Sometimes, he went to bed hungry because his salary was not enough. But still, every evening, he came back to work with a smile, ready to do his duties. Daniel had one dream. He loved music. Ever since he was a child, he wanted to sing. When he was young, he dreamed of standing on a stage with lights shining on him. But life was never kind to him. His father died early, and Daniel had to leave school to earn money for his family. His dream of singing slowly faded as survival became more important. Still, the love for music never left his heart. Whenever he felt tired, he sang quietly. His voice was soft, filled with both sadness and hope. It was the only thing that gave him peace. The office workers never noticed him. For them, he was invisible. They passed by him every day but never cared about his story. To them, Daniel was just the janitor. Nobody asked about his life, nobody asked about his dreams. He was used to it. But deep inside, he sometimes wished someone would see him, not just as a poor man with a mop, but as a human being with a voice, with a heart, and with feelings. That night was no different. Daniel picked up his old broom and started sweeping the shiny floors. The sound of the broom was the only sound in the empty building. His footsteps echoed in the hallways. As he worked, memories came back. He remembered the days when he used to sing for his little sister at home. She used to clap and say, "Daniel, one day you will be famous." But she was gone now. Life had taken her too. Sometimes, when Daniel thought about the past, his eyes filled with tears. But instead of crying, he sang. His songs carried his pain, his love, and his broken dreams. Nobody knew about this secret. Nobody ever listened. Or at least, that's what Daniel thought. He worked all night, moving from one office to another. He dusted tables, wiped windows, and carried heavy trash bags. Every time he bent down, his back hurt. Every time he stood up, his legs felt weak. He was not young anymore, but he had no choice. He needed this job to survive. The rich people who worked in this building never knew the pain behind the clean floors and shiny windows. They only saw a spotless office every morning. They never asked who made it possible. Daniel did. Every single night. But what nobody realized was that Daniel had more inside him than just hard work. He had a gift. A gift hidden behind poverty, hidden behind silence. A gift that was waiting for the right moment to be heard. And that night, while cleaning another empty room, Daniel started humming a song. His voice was low at first, almost like a whisper. But slowly, it grew stronger. The loneliness of the office mixed with his melody, and the halls carried his sound. He did not know that destiny was already watching. He did not know that this lonely song would open a door to something bigger than he ever imagined. For now, Daniel was just a poor janitor, tired, hungry, and unnoticed. But his story was only beginning. The building was silent. The only sound was Daniel's footsteps and the soft scrape of his broom across the polished floor. The night stretched long and empty, but Daniel's heart was heavy. Work gave him food, but it never gave him joy. As he moved from one office to the next, he felt the weight of his life pressing down. His stomach growled. He had skipped dinner again to save money. His back ached, but he told himself to keep going. Still, something inside him refused to give up completely, the love for music. That night, while lifting a heavy trash bag, Daniel sat down on a chair for a moment. The room was empty. The windows reflected the city lights outside. He closed his eyes. And then, quietly, he began to sing. At first, it was just a hum. A soft tune, like a whisper to himself. But soon, the melody grew stronger. His voice filled the empty room. The song was not a famous one. It was something Daniel made up, a mix of words and feelings. He sang about loneliness. He sang about dreams. He sang about working hard but still living in poverty. His voice was raw. It was not trained, not polished. But it was real. Every note carried pain. Every line carried hope. If someone listened carefully, they would feel the truth of his life inside his song. Daniel's eyes remained closed as he sang. In that moment, he forgot his broom, his mop, his hunger. He was not a poor janitor anymore. He was simply a man who loved music. He imagined himself standing on a big stage, lights shining on him, people clapping, and his mother smiling proudly. That dream made his voice even stronger. But what Daniel didn't know was that he was not completely alone. On the top floor of the building, the billionaire owner had returned late that night. His name was Mr. Roberts. He had come back to pick up some forgotten documents. The CEO walked down the hallway, his expensive shoes echoing against the marble floor. As he passed one of the rooms, he suddenly stopped. He heard something unusual. A voice. It was not the sound of a worker moving chairs or cleaning. It was singing. Pure, emotional singing. Curious, Mr. Roberts quietly stepped closer. He stood in the doorway, careful not to make a sound. His eyes landed on Daniel, who sat on a chair with his eyes closed, singing like nobody was watching. The billionaire's eyebrows rose. He had attended many concerts, met famous singers, and paid for the best performances. But this was different. The janitor's voice was not perfect, but it was powerful. It touched something deep inside him. For the first time in years, Mr. Roberts felt goosebumps. Daniel sang about pain, but in his pain there was beauty. He sang about loss, but in his loss there was strength. The CEO could almost see the man's story through his song. Mr. Roberts did not move. He just listened. He watched the poor janitor with his old uniform, worn-out shoes, and tired face, pouring his entire soul into a song. The contrast shocked him. How could such a man, invisible to the world, carry such a voice? Daniel, unaware of the billionaire's presence, continued to sing. His voice echoed through the empty halls. The silence of the building made the song even stronger. It was as if the walls themselves wanted to keep the music alive. When the song finally ended, Daniel opened his eyes slowly. He sighed, picked up his broom again, and stood up. To him, it was just another night. Another lonely performance. Another dream locked away. But to the billionaire standing at the door, it was unforgettable. Mr. Roberts' heart beat faster. He could not leave. Something about the janitor's song stayed with him. He decided, in that moment, that he needed to know more about this man. Daniel put away his broom and moved to another room, still humming softly. He still did not see the shadow in the doorway, the powerful man who had witnessed everything. The billionaire took a step back into the darkness, his mind full of thoughts. For years, he had seen people chase money, chase success, but he had rarely seen true passion. Tonight, he had found it, not in a boardroom, not in a concert hall, but in the tired voice of a poor janitor. And deep inside, Mr. Roberts knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Daniel kept working, thinking he was invisible, but the truth was different. Someone had noticed him. Someone important. Someone who could change his life. The lonely song of the janitor had reached the heart of a billionaire. And soon, the world would know what destiny had planned for Daniel. The office halls were silent again, but inside the billionaire's heart, something had already changed. Mr. Roberts stood in the shadows, hidden behind the doorway, watching Daniel without making a sound. His sharp eyes studied every detail, the way the janitor's hands gripped the broom, the tired curve of his shoulders, and the emotion that poured out when he sang. For years, Mr. Roberts had lived in wealth and power. He controlled companies, signed million-dollar deals, and had everything money could buy. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he felt a strange emptiness. Success had brought him riches, but not peace. People around him were always careful, always fake. They smiled because he was rich, not because they cared. But tonight, standing there in silence, listening to Daniel's raw and honest voice, he felt something real. Something pure. The janitor had no stage, no microphone, no audience. Yet his singing was more powerful than the grand concerts the CEO had attended. It was not just a song, it was a story. A story of hunger, struggle, and hope. Mr. Roberts leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. He let the music sink into him. Every note seemed to pull on his heart. He remembered his own childhood, the days when his family was poor. Back then, he promised himself he would never live in poverty again. And now, standing in front of this janitor, he was reminded of how far he had come, and how easily the world forgets people like Daniel. Daniel finished his song, sighed deeply, and picked up his broom again. He had no idea that someone had been watching the whole time. To him, it was just another lonely night. But for the billionaire, it was unforgettable. Mr. Roberts wanted to step forward, to tell Daniel what he had heard, but he stopped himself. Instead, he stayed hidden. He wanted to know more. He wanted to see if this man's passion was real or just a moment of weakness. The janitor moved slowly across the hall, still humming softly. His tired face looked older under the dull light, but his voice made him seem young again. Mr. Roberts followed quietly, keeping a distance. He watched as Daniel bent down to clean another corner. His movements were slow, his back stiff with pain, but there was no bitterness in his eyes. Only quiet strength. The billionaire's heart tightened. He was used to people begging him for favors, for money, for attention. But here was a man who asked for nothing, a man who carried his pain with dignity. A man who sang only for himself, not for applause. And that made him different. Daniel worked for another hour, completely unaware. At times, he sang louder. At times, he stopped to catch his breath. Every sound carried through the empty halls. Mr. Roberts never left his place. He listened as though he had discovered a secret treasure. Finally, Daniel sat down again, too tired to stand. He leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, and let out another song, this one softer, almost like a prayer. His voice cracked with exhaustion, but the emotion made it even more powerful. Mr. Roberts felt something stir inside him. A thought he had never imagined before. What if this janitor had a chance? What if the world could hear him the way I just did? The billionaire was not an emotional man, but he could not deny the truth. This janitor had a gift. A rare gift. And gifts like this should not be hidden. But still, he did not reveal himself. Not yet. Instead, he walked back slowly, his expensive shoes silent on the polished floor. He left the building without Daniel ever noticing him. That night, Mr. Roberts drove home in his luxury car, but his mind stayed behind in that office. The voice of the janitor echoed inside him. He could not sleep. He kept thinking about the man who sang like no one was listening, while in truth, someone very important was. Daniel, on the other hand, finished his shift and walked home. His legs were heavy, his body weak. He thought about the song he had sung and smiled sadly. To him, it was just another night of dreams that would never come true. He had no idea that fate had already placed a listener in his path. A listener who had the power to change his life forever. The next morning, Daniel returned home after another long night. His body was tired, but his mind was calm. Singing had helped him forget his pain, even if only for a few minutes. He believed nobody had heard him. To him, his songs were like secrets whispered to the empty walls. But what Daniel did not know was that someone had indeed heard. Someone powerful. Someone who was already making plans. Mr. Roberts, the billionaire owner, could not sleep that night. He kept hearing the janitor's voice in his head. Every word, every note stayed with him. He had seen thousands of people, dealt with hundreds of employees, but this poor janitor was different. Mr. Roberts wanted to be sure. He wanted to see if Daniel's singing was real passion, not just a moment of sadness. So he decided to test him. The following evening, when Daniel came to work, the CEO gave a special order to the manager. Ask the janitor to stay late tonight. I want him to clean the top floor carefully. Daniel was surprised when the manager told him. Usually, he was never asked to clean the top floor. That floor was special, with big offices and meeting rooms. Still, he nodded respectfully. Yes, sir. That night, when the building was almost empty again, Daniel carried his broom and mop upstairs. The top floor was quiet, more silent than the others. He walked slowly, his footsteps echoing. Meanwhile, Mr. Roberts sat in his office with the lights off. He waited quietly, listening. He wanted to see if the janitor would sing again, even when he thought nobody was around. Daniel began working. He dusted the large desk, wiped the glass windows, and swept the floor. The silence pressed down on him. Like always, he felt alone. And like always, his heart wanted to sing. At first, he hesitated. He looked around, just to be sure no one was there. Then, with a deep breath, he began humming. The sound grew into a melody, and soon his voice filled the big room. Mr. Roberts leaned back in his chair. His heart beat faster. The janitor's voice was even stronger tonight. The passion was real. It was not an act. It was who he was. Daniel sang with closed eyes, pouring out everything he had inside. His pain, his hunger, his hopes, all of it came out through his voice. He sang as if he was free, as if the walls were his audience and the night was his stage. When he finished, he sighed and whispered to himself, maybe one day. Then he bent down to pick up his broom again. But this time, something happened. A deep voice came from behind him. "Why do you sing like that?" Daniel froze. He turned quickly, and his eyes widened. Standing near the door was Mr. Roberts himself, the owner of the company. Daniel's heart raced. Fear spread through him. I'm sorry, sir," he stammered. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I'll stop." But the billionaire shook his head. His expression was serious, yet there was kindness in his eyes. "No. I'm not angry. I asked you a question. Why do you sing like that?" Daniel looked down, nervous. His hands gripped the broom tightly. For a moment, he thought about staying silent. But then, slowly, he spoke. "Because singing makes me forget," he said softly. "When I sing, I forget my hunger. I forget my pain. I forget that I am poor. For a little while, I feel free." Mr. Roberts studied him carefully. The honesty in Daniel's words touched him deeply. There was no greed, no lies, only truth. "Do you always sing while working?" the CEO asked. Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir. Nobody ever listens. But it helps me survive." For a long moment, the room was silent. The rich man and the poor janitor stood face to face, two men from completely different worlds. One had everything, the other had nothing. Yet in that moment, they were connected by something stronger than money, music. Mr. Roberts finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. "Your voice is powerful. More powerful than you realize." Daniel blinked in shock. Nobody had ever said such words to him before. All his life, people had ignored him, treated him as invisible. Now the most powerful man in the building was telling him he had something special. But Daniel didn't know what to say. He lowered his head again. "Thank you, sir. But I'm just a janitor." The CEO gave a small smile. "Maybe for now. But not forever." Those words lingered in the air like a promise. Daniel went back to work, still shaken by the strange encounter. His heart pounded with confusion and curiosity. What did the billionaire mean? Why was he even listening to him? He had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. The night after their short conversation, Daniel could not stop thinking about the billionaire's words. "Maybe for now. But not forever." Those words echoed in his mind as he walked home through the dark streets. He wondered if the CEO had just been kind for a moment, or if he truly meant something more. Still, he shook his head and told himself, "I'm just a janitor. Nothing more." But life was already preparing something different. The next day, Mr. Roberts sat in his office with his senior staff. They discussed money, contracts, and profits. But his mind kept drifting back to the janitor's song. He could not forget it. It was not business. It was not numbers. It was something human, something real. Finally, he made a decision. That evening, when most employees had gone home, he called Daniel to his office. Daniel walked in nervously, holding his cleaning tools. He had never been inside the CEO's office before. The large room was filled with expensive furniture, tall shelves, and glowing city lights shining through the wide windows. Daniel felt out of place, like a stranger who did not belong there. "Sit down," Mr. Roberts said calmly. Daniel hesitated. "Sir, I'm here to clean." "I didn't call you here to clean," the billionaire interrupted. His voice was firm but not unkind. "I called you here to talk." Daniel slowly sat on the edge of the chair, unsure of what was happening. His hands trembled slightly. Mr. Roberts looked at him for a moment, then leaned forward. "I heard you sing. Not once, but twice. Do you know what I saw?" Daniel shook his head silently. "I saw a man with nothing," the CEO continued, "yet with a gift more powerful than money. You sang with pain, but also with hope. You sang not for fame, not for applause, but because it was the only way your soul could breathe." Daniel's eyes widened. Nobody had ever spoken to him like this. He swallowed hard, trying to find words, but nothing came. The CEO leaned back in his chair. His expression softened. "Daniel, I need you to understand something. You are more than just a janitor." Daniel lowered his eyes. "Sir, with respect, I am poor. I have no education, no stage, no future. Singing is only for myself. It can never change my life." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, Mr. Roberts stood up and walked to the window. His voice grew deeper. "You are wrong. Talent like yours should not be hidden in empty halls. The world deserves to hear it. And I can make that happen." Daniel looked up quickly, shocked. What do you mean?" The billionaire turned back and faced him. His eyes were steady. "Next week, our company is hosting a special event. All the workers, managers, partners, even people from outside will be there. I want you to sing that night." Daniel's mouth fell open. His heart pounded in his chest. "Me? Sing? At an event? Sir, no. I can't. People will laugh at me. I'm just a cleaner. Nobody will listen." Mr. Roberts stepped closer. "They will listen. Because I will introduce you myself. They respect me. And if I tell them you are worth listening to, they will hear you." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Nobody had ever believed in him. All his life, people only saw him as poor, invisible, unimportant. And now, the richest man in the building was offering him a chance he never imagined. "But sir," he whispered, his voice shaking, "what if I fail?" The billionaire placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you fail trying. But I don't think you will. I think you will surprise everyone, including yourself." Daniel's heart trembled. A storm of fear and hope raged inside him. He could not believe this was happening. For years, he had sung alone, unseen and unheard. And now, he was being asked to sing in front of hundreds of people. Mr. Roberts gave a small smile. "This is your test, Daniel. The world may call you a janitor. But I see something greater. Will you take this chance?" Daniel sat frozen. His mind told him to say no, to hide, to stay safe. But his heart whispered yes. Slowly, with tears in his eyes, he nodded. "I will try." The billionaire's smile grew wider. "Good. Then it's settled. Next week, you will no longer sing alone in the dark. You will sing where everyone can hear you." And with those words, the path of Daniel's life began to change. The week passed slowly for Daniel. Every night when he came to work, he thought about what the billionaire had said. He was scared. He was excited. He was confused. For years, Daniel had lived in silence. His songs were his secret, something he shared only with empty rooms and lonely nights. Now, suddenly, he was asked to sing in front of hundreds of people. At times, he wanted to back out. He told himself, "I am just a janitor. People will laugh at me." But then he remembered the CEO's words, "You are more than just a janitor." Those words gave him courage. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The grand hall of the company was decorated with lights and flowers. Employees, managers, partners, and special guests filled the room. The air was full of laughter and music. Daniel stood nervously behind the stage. His heart pounded in his chest. His hands trembled. He felt out of place among the shining suits and glamorous dresses. He wanted to run away, but his legs would not move. Then, Mr. Roberts walked over to him. The billionaire placed a firm hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked calmly. Daniel shook his head slightly. "Sir, I'm afraid. I've never done this before." The CEO looked him straight in the eye. "Courage is not about being fearless. Courage is singing even when you are afraid. Remember, Daniel, tonight, you sing not just for them. You sing for yourself. For every night you sang alone. For every dream you thought was lost." Daniel swallowed hard. He nodded slowly. Moments later, Mr. Roberts walked onto the stage. The crowd grew silent as the billionaire took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "tonight, I want to introduce someone very special. Many of you know him only as the janitor who cleans our offices every night. But what you do not know is that this man carries a gift inside him, a gift I had the honor to witness myself. Please welcome Daniel." The audience was stunned. Some whispered. Some frowned. A janitor. On stage. Daniel walked slowly into the lights. His old shoes felt heavy. His palms were sweating. He saw the crowd staring at him, waiting. For a moment, fear almost crushed him. But then, he closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. And he began to sing. At first, his voice was soft, almost uncertain. But then, as the words left his mouth, his strength returned. His voice rose, full of emotion, full of pain, full of hope. The hall grew silent. Every whisper stopped. Every eye focused on the poor janitor who now stood like a man reborn. Daniel sang about life. He sang about struggles, about hunger, about dreams that refused to die. His voice carried the truth of every hard night he had lived through. Some people in the audience felt chills. Others wiped their tears. They had never heard such honesty in a song before. When the final note left his lips, silence filled the hall. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause. Loud, powerful applause. People stood from their seats, clapping and cheering. Daniel opened his eyes in shock. He had never imagined this moment. His dream, the one he had buried long ago, was alive again. Mr. Roberts walked back onto the stage, smiling proudly. He raised Daniel's hand and said to the crowd, "Remember this night. Remember this man. Talent does not wear expensive clothes. Talent does not sit only in big offices. Sometimes, true talent is sweeping floors when no one is looking. Tonight, Daniel showed us that." The applause grew louder. Tears ran down Daniel's face. He could not believe it. For the first time in his life, he was seen. He was heard. He was respected. From that night on, Daniel's life began to change. He was no longer just the janitor. He was invited to sing at more events. People wanted to hear his story, his songs, his voice. He still worked hard, he still lived simply, but now he walked with pride. He was no longer invisible. And he knew, deep in his heart, that it all began on one lonely night, when he sang for himself, not knowing that a billionaire was listening.